It sounded like a tragedy unfolding behind palace walls. The queen consort, worn down by years of public scrutiny, had reportedly collapsed under the weight of it all. Severe mental exhaustion, they said. Major depression, the documents claimed. The story was heartbreaking. And the timing was devastating. Because just as King Charles was preparing to hand Princess Anne control over the royal finances, one of the most significant power shifts in modern royal history, his wife's health suddenly took a turn for the worse. It seemed like a cruel coincidence, but was it? Because here's the thing about coincidences inside the palace. They're almost never coincidences. And the moment you start looking at the timeline, something doesn't add up. This wasn't a gradual decline. It wasn't the slow erosion of someone's mental health under months of pressure. It happened overnight. The very same night, Charles revealed his plan to Anne. That's not how mental health crises work. That's how strategies work. And what makes this story truly remarkable is not what Camilla did, it's what Princess Anne discovered when she started paying attention to the details that everyone else had missed. Now, before we go any further, if you're new here, this is the channel that breaks down royal drama as it actually happens. Hit subscribe. It helps more than you know. So, here's where the story begins. King Charles, according to multiple reports, had been planning a major overhaul of the royal household's finances. Not just a minor adjustment, a complete restructuring of how money moves through the institution. We're talking about the Privy Purse, the official body that manages the monarch's private finances, living expenses, and the entire internal operating budget for the royal family. This is the financial backbone of the palace. Whoever controls this controls the monarchy's resources, and Charles had decided to give that control to someone he trusted completely, his younger sister, Princess Anne. Now, if you know anything about Anne, this decision makes perfect sense. She is famously disciplined, she has a work ethic that borders on relentless. She doesn't do fluff, she doesn't do waste. She's the kind of person who completes 4 engagements in a single day and still looks mildly irritated that there wasn't a 5th. When Charles looked at the royal household and saw bloat, inefficiency, and unnecessary spending, putting Anne in charge of cleaning it up was the most logical decision he could have made. But there was one person who didn't see it that way. And that person was Camilla. Because this decision, according to palace insiders, directly threatened her position. And not just in a symbolic way. If Anne controlled the purse strings, Camilla's influence over internal resources would simply evaporate. Her ability to direct funds, shape budgets, and maintain her household would be gone. She would become a figurehead without any real power. But it wasn't just about the money. There was something else, something deeper: jealousy. King Charles trusts Anne completely. And that's not just a sibling thing, it's a lifetime of Anne proving herself reliable, competent, and utterly loyal to the institution. Camilla, on the other hand, has spent years trying to solidify her role. She has worked tirelessly to be seen as more than just Charles's companion. She has fought for respect. And when she saw that trust being handed to Anne, something shifted. Now, this is where the timeline gets particularly interesting. If Camilla was genuinely suffering from mental exhaustion caused by public pressure, you would expect her health to decline gradually, over months, even years. You would expect visible signs during public engagements. You would expect staff to notice small changes over time. But according to the reports, none of that happened. Instead, her sudden deterioration coincided almost perfectly with the moment she learned about the king's plan. That's a very specific kind of timing, and once you notice that timing, you start noticing other things too. According to palace sources, Camilla's response to this news was surprisingly calculated. She had reportedly been preparing for a moment like this, and she had a plan. She allegedly contacted a private physician in Chelsea, not through official channels, not through the palace medical team, a private doctor, a discreet arrangement, and she asked him to create something very specific, a medical dossier. Not just a vague note saying she was feeling unwell, an official medical report diagnosing her with severe mental exhaustion and major depression. The kind of document that would make any husband pause, the kind of document that would make a king reconsider his decisions. The The report alleged that Camilla asked this doctor to state that her condition was caused by relentless public pressure, and she offered financial compensation in exchange for the diagnosis. If that's true, this isn't a case of someone exaggerating their symptoms. It's a coordinated effort to manipulate the king's compassion. Once she had the falsified medical report in hand, Camilla began to appear before King Charles in a very specific way. She looked visibly haggard. Her face was drawn. Her eyes were weary. And she cried. She broke down in tears and pleaded with him to reconsider. But here's the part that makes the story truly revealing. She didn't just ask him to slow down the transition. She framed her argument in a way designed to sound selfless. She told him that if he gave her control of the privy purse instead of Anne, it would give her a sense of purpose. It would help her recover. It would be the motivation she needed to heal. That's a very specific kind of manipulation. It takes a position of weakness and turns it into a demand for power. She wasn't asking for a pause. She was asking him to reverse the decision entirely and hand her the exact authority he was planning to give to Anne. And she used her health as the justification. For a while, it seemed like it might work. King Charles reportedly began to waver. He saw his wife looking exhausted. He had a medical report in his hands. He was caught between his plan to streamline the palace and his instinct to protect his spouse. And Camilla knew exactly how to exploit that conflict. But then she made another move. And this one, more than anything else, revealed her actual priorities. According to the reports, she didn't stop at asking for control of the privy purse. She also demanded a written commitment from King Charles, transferring all of the late Queen Elizabeth II's symbolic jewelry collections to her and to her children from her previous marriage. Now, think about that for a moment. These are priceless pieces, tied to the history of the monarchy. They belong to the crown, not to any individual. And the fact that Camilla brought this up in the middle of a conversation about her mental health tells you everything you need to know about her actual priorities. If the goal was truly recovery, why would she need jewelry? Why would she need a written pledge about inheritance? Why would she need financial security for her children from a previous marriage? Those aren't the demands of someone who is suffering. They are the demands of someone who is consolidating power. And that's exactly what Princess Anne started to notice. Anne is not someone who misses details. She is sharp, observant, and deeply skeptical of anything that doesn't add up. And according to the reports, she began to suspect that something was off. She started noticing Camilla making secret phone calls whenever the king left the room. The pattern was consistent. Charles would step out of his study, and Camilla would immediately pull out her phone and begin speaking in a hushed tone. And the way she behaved on those calls didn't match the image of someone suffering from severe mental exhaustion. She was too focused, too calculated, too deliberate. So Anne did something very direct. She placed a trusted servant on the palace cleaning staff assigned to Camilla's quarters. And that servant eventually managed to photograph the contents of Camilla's phone, call logs, message exchanges, the whole thing. When Anne reviewed the evidence, she found exactly what she suspected: the private physician in Chelsea, the same name on the medical diagnosis, the same number appearing repeatedly in Camilla's call history. At this point, Anne didn't wait for permission. She didn't go through channels. She went directly to the doctor's clinic and confronted him. And this is where the story shifts from suspicion to confirmation. Because according to the reports, the doctor initially tried to defend his work. He claimed the diagnosis was based on proper medical procedures. But when Anne showed him the call records and the message exchanges, he collapsed. He admitted that Camilla had contacted him, that she had offered financial compensation, that the diagnosis was entirely fabricated. There were no actual health indicators supporting the claims of mental exhaustion or depression. It was all a performance. Anne now had everything she needed: a living witness, screenshots, testimony, the doctor's full confession, and she took all of it directly to King Charles. Imagine being the king in that moment. For weeks, you've been worried about your wife's health. You've been reconsidering a major financial decision because you wanted to support her. And then your sister walks into your study and places a dossier in front of you, showing that the entire thing was staged. That's not just disappointing. That's deeply humiliating. According to the reports, Anne laid it all out. The fabricated medical indicators, the secret negotiations, the financial arrangement, the fact that Camilla's exhausted appearance was part of a coordinated performance designed to manipulate his compassion. And then she connected it to the larger goal. Camilla didn't want to recover, she wanted control. She wanted the privy purse, she wanted the jewelry. She wanted to secure her position and her children's inheritance. The health crisis was just a tool. King Charles reportedly sat in silence. He was shocked. And then he did something that suggests he understood the full weight of the situation. He convened an emergency meeting of the Royal Council. Not a private conversation, not a quiet resolution. A full meeting with the core members of the council present. And Anne brought the doctor into that meeting as a witness. The doctor stood in the middle of the chamber and confessed everything. He broke down every fabricated indicator. He explained how Camilla had directed the process. He confirmed the financial arrangement, and with that testimony on record, the entire performance collapsed. There was no room for denial, no way to spin it. The evidence was sitting on the table. King Charles then delivered his judgment. He announced that all previous considerations regarding Camilla's authority were revoked. She was stripped of all control over resources, budgets, and internal affairs. She lost every privilege connected to access to royal finances or inheritance. And then he went further. He ordered her expelled from Buckingham Palace, immediately, that night. This was a stunning escalation, not a temporary separation, not a cooling-off period, an official removal from the palace grounds. The guards were instructed to enforce it without delay. According to the reports, Camilla was forced to pack her belongings in silence while the rain poured down outside. She had no argument, no defense, no way to salvage the situation. The image described in the reports is almost cinematic. Camilla stepping out into the courtyard as the rain intensified, her tears mixing with the rainwater, her voice breaking as she cried out to Charles, asking how he could treat her this way after half a lifetime together. But here's the thing, she wasn't asking why he was being cruel. She was asking why her plan didn't work. She was asking why she lost everything in a single night. And that's a very different question. Because when you actually look at what was said versus what happened, the contradiction is glaring. Camilla claimed she was suffering from mental exhaustion caused by public pressure, but the evidence showed she was actively coordinating with a doctor to fabricate that diagnosis. She claimed she wanted to recover, but her demands were about money, jewels, and inheritance. She claimed she was too weak to handle the pressure, but she was strong enough to execute a multi-step manipulation campaign. That's not a health crisis. That's a power grab. And the fact that she framed it as a health crisis makes it worse, because it exploits the very compassion that King Charles was trying to show her. It weaponizes empathy. Princess Anne didn't need to do any of this. She could have stayed quiet. She could have let the situation play out. But she didn't. She saw something wrong and she acted. And the reason she was able to act is because she paid attention to the details. The secret phone calls. The timing. The inconsistency between Camilla's public presentation and her private behavior. That's what uncovered the truth. So what's the deeper lesson here? I think it's pretty simple. Transparency matters, not just in institutions, but in relationships. When someone asks for power and justifies it by pointing to their own suffering, you have to ask whether the suffering is real or whether it's being used as leverage. And when someone refuses to answer direct questions, when they deflect, when they cry at convenient moments, that's not proof of vulnerability. Sometimes it's proof of strategy. Camilla reportedly stood outside the gates of Buckingham Palace as they closed behind her. The rain was still falling. She had nothing left. No position, no dignity, no access to the finances or the jewelry she had demanded. And the worst part for her is that she did it to herself. She built the entire plan. She hired the doctor. She staged the illness. She pushed for more and more until the whole thing collapsed under its own weight. Now, the question is whether King Charles will ever trust her again. Because once trust is broken like that, it doesn't come back easily. And the fact that he was willing to expel her immediately suggests he understood that he didn't need time to think. He didn't need to consult anyone else. He saw the evidence, and he acted. But beyond the immediate fallout, there's a larger conversation happening inside the palace right now about what this means for the monarchy's future. Because this wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was an attempt to redirect royal resources and symbolic assets away from the institution and into private hands. And that's something the palace has always guarded against. The line between the crown and the individual has been carefully maintained for centuries. Once someone tries to blur that line for personal gain, the entire system reacts. And that's exactly what happened here. The council didn't hesitate. The king, despite whatever personal pain he might have felt, didn't hesitate either. Because this wasn't about whether Camilla was a good wife or a supportive companion. It was about whether the monarchy could allow itself to be manipulated from within. And the answer was no. Now, there are still questions about what happens next. Will Camilla retreat quietly to a private residence? Or will she attempt to push back through her own connections? Will her children from her previous marriage attempt to challenge the revocation of inheritance promises? And will the palace release any official statement about the separation? Or will they simply allow the silence to speak for itself? Those questions matter. But they're secondary to the central fact. The plan failed, the manipulation was exposed, and the person who exposed it was the one person Camilla never expected to be watching. Princess Anne, the sister who doesn't seek attention, the royal who doesn't chase headlines, the one who simply does the work and notices when something doesn't add up. That's the real story here. Not just the downfall of a queen consort, but the quiet competence of a princess who understood that loyalty to the crown means protecting it from everyone, even from the people standing inside the palace walls. So yeah, the story is dramatic, but the lesson is pretty simple. If you have to fake a breakdown to get what you want, you probably shouldn't have it in the first place. And if you're going to manipulate someone, maybe don't do it in front of Princess Anne, because she will notice, she will investigate, and she will bring the receipts. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.